2005 Chevy Trailblazer. And if you look at it, I don't know if you see it, but you got a little rust going on, and you got a little of that magic metal fairy glitter. So customer complaints comes in, it's grinding and it's squealing really bad, which brakes are going to the floor. It's pretty rough. See if I can get you guys and show you, but yeah, and we'll get a better picture once I take this off. She needs rotors, and the other ones is just about as shot. So we'll go ahead, take this off. I believe the wheel is a 19mm. Let's buzz it and let's get to changing brakes. $13 up here, $13 on the bottom. Take off the caliper. I normally have to pry these off, but considering these are worn down pretty bad, you don't have to really worry about that. Let's go ahead and secure our caliper. So I'm going to take off the back bracket. It's going to be an 18mm over here, 18mm right over here. Let's go ahead and use a nice breaker bar because this thing is pretty torqued to factory specs, I'm sure. There we go. Nice. Now that's pretty rough. Definitely got their money worth on that one. So yeah, definitely gonna have to change that. We're gonna pop off those rotors and I'll show you guys how these look. You can see these rotors are spanked junk. Now the inside one is also about evenly worn. The other one is slightly worn more, so they were wearing pretty evenly for the most part, so that's not too bad. And what we'll do is we'll go ahead and we'll compress this caliper and just make sure that it's not seized or anything. But most of the time over here in the southern belt, we don't have that issue. So now what I typically do over here is I just kind of clean the face of the hub, just kind of spray everything off. I got a ton of metal just from all that backing from the brake pads. So you just want to clean these up, make sure we have a nice surface. It's not terrible because we're in the south and we don't have a lot of that crap and corrosion going on. So, but just enough to make sure that it's sitting. Just make sure you have no raises over here. Usually I get a small screwdriver, just kind of make sure this will be sitting flat and smooth. Just get anything that kind of looks like it's going to make the brake rotor not sit flat against the hub. Alright, so what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and use one of these tools. And typically I got to use a backing because these have that whole dual piston stuff going on. Push these in and that should be good. Now, the person who had this vehicle, they added brake fluid because apparently when your brakes are bad, that's the thing to do, just add brake fluid. So they went ahead and did that. So I went ahead and put some rags. I don't have anything to suck out the excess brake fluid, but at least it won't be as bad. So just kind of keep that in mind. If the brake fluid reservoir is topped off and your brake pads look like this, yeah, there's a good chance that somebody's just been topping it with fluid. So now for our brake pads. So went ahead and took the caliper bracket off. Got to clean this off pretty good. Like I said, luckily we don't have rust and crust over here down in the south. So these mounting points right over here, we could just go ahead and just clean them off real quick. And it don't take much. Now for use people up in the north, yeah, it's going to require a lot. I've already done like a few passes, and I mean, this thing already looks 20 times better. But the point is that we want to make sure that this is nice and smooth, and we don't have no rust jacking or anything that's going to create the pad shims to sit higher and create tension on the pad. And like I said, down here, this don't take much to do. Alright, so now that's done, just go ahead and wipe it. Should be good. And now the pins, gotta service these. So these actually don't look too bad. Yeah, these are not too bad. What I typically do is I just take off the grease, just put new grease in there, just make it fresh. Could you ever use this? Yeah, but why not use fresh grease? If you're in a bind, I would probably do it that way, but considering that I'm not, I like to use the synthetic CRC brake and caliper grease. Some people use silicone, some people use grease. I've used this for the pins. I've never had an issue. I've never had a brake job come back to me. And in fact, when I've had to go and do the brakes 2 years later on a vehicle, this grease is still good and the pins are still moving nice and smooth. So just food for thought. Now make sure right over here they get a good amount of grease, because that's kind of where it sits on the rubber bushing, on the rubber boot. And that'll kind of help it get a good seal. Make sure you burp it. Same thing with this side. Just wipe everything down, keep it clean as can be. And if you got to clean this out real thoroughly, take these off. These look like they've been there for a little bit, and I don't want to break them because I don't have them. But most part, this caliper is not that bad. Same thing over here, like I said, burp it. Now typically what I'll do is, because this is not sitting like the way I would like, but what I'll do is I'll take a pin and kind of feed back in there and pull it. And I actually allowed it to go down a little more. There we go. And these, turn them once you put the grease in there, turn them, move them up and down. And these should move nice and freely. If it's getting stuck, you got to clean it. Sometimes these pins get seized and they get dried up and you just got to clean it. I'll usually take like some emery cloth or even some Scotch pad just to clean it up, just depending on how bad it is. Next is the hardware. Typically I like to reuse the original hardware because they're always way better than these aftermarket ones, but in this case they're all chewed up because, well, number one, they wrote it down to the pad, and number two, I'm not even sure if those are original anymore, if I'm being honest with you. What I do, I just put a little dab, that's it, of this right over here on both parts, just a little bit. If you put too much, you can actually raise it, smear it pretty good. This kind of prevents it from sticking and getting crap underneath. We live in the South, so we don't have that issue, but it's an old practice from when I was in New York. Right. Now these aftermarket hardwares, make sure that it's sitting down and flush against the bracket. If it's raised or it's off center wampus, sometimes you have to kind of mold these things into place. This looks like it's sitting perfect, so I'm happy with it. Now one thing I do is I take the pads and I kind of make sure that they feel good and they feel right. I want to make sure that when I put them in, they slide and they move, which these move perfect. And this is a good way to test it before you put it together. If they're not moving perfectly, I typically just go ahead and return them and just get a different brand, because some brands just make things different. An option, if you're in a bind, you can actually grind down these ears little by little until it moves. You just want a very slight drag on it. I mean, very slight. These should move freely, which these do, and I'm happy with it. So let's go ahead, let's put this on the car. All right, so our caliper, let's see, might be too bright. Let's see. Caliper actually has a little piece of hardware right over here, and before I take this out and try to figure out how to do it, let's just access. Alright, so looks like this goes right here towards the back, towards the hose. This piece right over here goes in there, and that goes in there. So let's see if we can take this out. That was pretty easy. Hopefully these go in that easy. Alright, pretty simple. New rotor, pretty much the same thing from Advance. So we're going to pop these in. Make sure you kind of wipe them down with a little brake part cleaner and just wipe off all that little cosmoline in the back. So good practice. So one thing I like to do is, because I don't like this thing flopping around, is I will actually take one of these lugs from the wheel. This one goes through and through, and I'll just kind of tighten this down enough to hold this in place. That way I can clean and not have to wrestle with this while installing the caliper. And all you got to do is snug it, and that way this don't move. So little advice tip that I like to do. For good measure, I just take a little bit of this stuff. I probably just put a blob on one of these ears, and then the excess I just kind of wipe it all down. You don't need much of it. Mount this back in, and this is so much easier when this rotor is not flopping around. So my recommendation, use the lug. If not, you can use an axle nut. If you have one of those lugs that have an end at it and they're not through and through, you can use an axle nut, a bunch of washers, just something to kind of hold it in place. Of course, torque these down, but if you do this long enough, you kind of get a feel for it. All right, pop in your pads. Let's make sure they feel smooth and good. Ours move nice and easy. They feel very good, so that's fine. The calipers should slide on smooth and perfectly. Once again, if that's not sliding on, you might have to compress it more, or your pad is sticking and you need to figure out what's going on with that one. By the time you're done with this, your brakes should feel nice and smooth. If you look, caliper moves nice and easy. Everything is tight and torque-ish to factory spec. There should be no resistance or anything like that. The pad, as you can see, still moves. Not dancing around where it's too loose, but it just slides. Everything should slide back and forth nice and easy. If it's not doing that, then take it apart, find out what is seized. Either the hardware is not sitting properly, the pins are gummed up and seized. I've seen that happen, but this should move nice and easy. So I'm gonna go ahead, put the wheel on, do the other side, and then we'll go for a road test. Wonder if the customer knows about the check engine light and that light. Maybe service the 4-wheel drive. I don't know what that light is. I'm not much of a Chevy guy. So just a quick road test just to make sure that the brakes are not clicking, clacking, clunking. But if I'm honest with you, these brakes are, this vehicle is doing that. She running rough. There we go. Come on, come on. Just give her a little moderate stops. Yeah, brakes feel fine on it. So other than that, brakes are good. Calipers were perfect as they can be. So yeah, pretty simple. I think the shop had quoted her a new set of calipers for whatever reason. I guess they had some lying around or just upcharging like they normally do. So I mean, just check your equipment, make sure the calipers go in fine with no resistance, and you should be good. So hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching. We'll see what we fix next.